So, ladies and gentlemen, we're very pleased to welcome our guests and all the delegates of our conclusive panel to strengthen dialogue. Over the past 2 days, we've been talking about the economic dialogue. Indeed, many attention has been devoted to the interaction in the field of energy, in the field of finance, and to other industries. But this obviously always requires a political dialogue, overcoming the role of diplomacy, which is at a time of crisis, according to many politologists, but overestimating the role of those people that guide a dialogue and such a predicament that at times find a point of contact, whether that is an uphill task, that require major work, major courage. It takes a lot of boldness in doing so, and it takes a lot of professional skills. So in Russia, much attention is devoted to diplomacy. And oftentimes we congratulate on the results that are achieved by means of a Pacific dialogue. No. So, with whom should we establish this dialogue or strengthen this dialogue? 3/5 of the delegates to the forum are we should probably exchange some dialogue between the two parts of the stage, basically, on the panel and the audience. I'd like to take advantage of myself being a journalist. I'm now working as a moderator. I'm going to act as a moderator, so I'll ask questions to the speakers, and then we'll react. Everybody will react to everybody else's contribution, and we'll possibly find points of contact and things that may enable us to strengthen the peaceful future in Eurasia. So, Sergei Razov, good afternoon. The Italian Prime Minister at the summit of the European Union basically stopped the possibility to raise additional sanctions against Russia because of the Syrian crisis. Is there any comment that you wish to make on the subject? But I'd like also to ask a question. How do you think you can define the relationship, the dialogue between Europe and Russia, and what do you think can promote such dialogue, and what is a hindrance to the dialogue? Dear Evelyn, well, you're a friend. I would also like to welcome and greet all the delegates that are still present at this hour, at the second day. Well, I'm not taking the floor for the first time now in this hall, but earlier on, the ambassadors used to take the floor at the beginning of the forum, so I would always start the conference, wishing a fruitful meeting and acknowledging the work of my friend Antonio Fallico. Now, I won't break with the past. The only thing is that I listened to many speakers during the past 2 days, and we've listened to dialogue, at times a monologue at this forum, and there is one thing which I wish to say, and that the contents have been very interesting. I've heard very interesting things being said. Now, as for my acknowledgement to Mr. Fallico, I would like to say that the forum, as guided by Antonio Fallico, has grew importantly, is a pan-European forum and may be compared to other pan-European events. And as I said over and over again, also in other situations, I think that only with difficulty can we find another country in Europe or worldwide, even, exception made for the former Soviet countries and of the independent of the CIS. Well, I think I think that only with difficulty can we find countries devoting attention to the Eurozone integration and on the project that are underway in the Eurasia, but Italy. And that's why we're very grateful to our friends in Italy. Now, with reference to the question that was raised or to the questions that were raised, well, but professionally, me and my colleagues at the embassy, and I wish to answer your question, Evelina. Well, as I was saying, to answer your question, I believe that our bilateral relations with Italy, despite all the difficulty, despite the changed climate between the West and Russia, well, I believe that our relations are pretty stable. And consolidating dialogue is a very topical subject in our bilateral relations. The dialogue with Italy is kept alive at top levels, at a political level. Now, I won't bore you quoting examples. Let me just quote a few. The Italian Prime Minister, Mr. Renzi, for example, was involved in the St. Petersburg Forum with quite a delegation of businessmen, Italian businessmen, and not all other Western partners looked at that with appreciation. Well, the Italian Prime Minister had to be quite bold politically to come to the St. Petersburg and meet with the President of the Russian Federation and agree, and this is even more important, agree with him that there could be potential for further cooperation. I'd like to remind the audience that in the framework of the negotiations with St. Petersburg, tens of agreements were entered into corresponding to some €1,300,000 euro. After an interruption of 4 years last year, a meeting was held of the Economic Council, and this is an intergovernmental committee for financial and scientific and economic cooperation. And let me recall that this happened after 4 years of interruption. And what I'd like to stress is that the number of businessmen, top-level businessmen that were accompanying the Vice Premier was larger than the number of the people accompanying the counterpart. That was a business meeting. And just 1 week ago, an agreement was signed by the two foreign ministers of our countries. And the first meeting was held of the task force of the working group on the new challenges among the foreign ministers. Again, the most important subject was the joint fight against international terrorism, which, as you may understand, is one at the top of the agenda, internationally speaking. And this, again, is another sphere for cooperation. Additional subjects were discussed, as the situation in Lebanon, Syria, and elsewhere. By the end of the year, we expect to welcome the Minister for Economic Development and Businessmen and the Foreign Minister of the Russian Confederation, so as to enter into bilateral agreements. So this list in itself proves that close ties exist between Russia and Italy. I was already given the possibility to take the floor and comment on trade and economic cooperation. There are objective reasons why the situation is not as rosy. Trade volume, for example, was equal to $54 million user, and that was in 2013. Last year it dropped importantly, and it is still declining nowadays, and that obviously is a reason for great sadness. There are many reasons explaining this. There are two objective set of reasons, i.e. the reduction of energy prices that account for some 80-85% of our exports to Italy. So despite the fact that the physical amount of our exports can remain unchanged, that the value declines anyway. The second reason explaining this decline is given by the fact that a dramatic change has taken place in terms of our currency exchange, so much so that import from Eurozone is much less attractive. Then there is a subjective reasons, and that has to do with sanctions, of course. Sanctions are counterproductive. Indeed, they cause damage, especially in Italy, especially the damages are caused within the business community, and in that case, there can't be different opinions. There are also causes of force majeure. There are the decisions made by the European institutions that wanted to stress the Euro-Atlantic agreement, and Italy is a member in NATO as well. We don't feel deluded there. I think that the realism is the approach which is most necessary. We cannot obviously be deluded. We cannot just express our wishful thinking. Now, going back to the question, and I apologize for taking so long because I've said many things before actually taking in the question that was raised, but that was quite a long preamble. But anyway, there's a question that many have already asked. So how do we value the meeting at the Council of Europe, and how do we value the stance as taken by the Italian government, as personally voiced by the Italian Prime Minister, Mr. Renzi, well, indeed, he said that no extraordinary sanctions are to be raised against us after the Syria crisis. And I'd like to reiterate once again that we duly consider this stance. We believe that this is the right approach. And we obviously share in the opinion of the Italian Prime Minister in keeping the dialogue open. This is not just connected to the present situation in time. This is the position and the stance of different political parties, both for and against the government. And this is also the opinion of the business community. The business community, indeed, is certainly quite clear on that. We hope that common sense will prevail. Now, as to the efforts of Russia on the Syrian situation, well, I believe that this is not the right venue to talk about that. Many other Russian authorities have already stated their stance on that. Now, if there are questions, I'm ready to take them now. But now, to conclude, I want to say that I believe that crises come and go. I look with a good I consider that relations are good. I've been working in this position for a number of years, and I firmly believe that the interests of Italy and Russia, the moods, the desires, the wishes of both our countries and peoples go hand in hand and often coincide, and that is based for our relations to be kept open and further develop in the future. Thank you. Thank you to Sergei Razov, the ambassador of the Russian Federation to the Italian Republic. So, Sergei Sergeyevich, I have a very short question to address you that probably will refer to the turnover of our trade. As soon as the political crisis started, that coincided with economic crisis, the business community tried and act in a certain way in that they narrowed the timescale of their planning. Earlier on, they would talk about a 10-year planning. Now they are just confining themselves to 4-year plans. So my question is as follows. Do you think that even in politics there's the same reduction in planning? Does it have an impact on how entrepreneurs are going to act? Well, I believe that we have to invest in the future of our relationships. I believe that there's a clear political sign given to the business community. And I believe that to foster our cooperation and to see an increase in the business turnover, we have to work, we have to be fully committed, as well as the entrepreneurs and the SME and SMEs. If any member of the Italian business community that has been working for years in the Russian area, and there are some 400 of them, well, nobody has withdrawn from the market despite the difficulties, despite the sanctions. Well, the overwhelming majority of Italian businessmen do not wish to forgo the position they have vanquished on the Russian market after years and decades of work. The roots of our cooperation date back to many years ago. So obviously they understand that if should they leave, the gap is going to be filled by somebody else. Now, with reference to the reduction in turnover, well, Italy ranks number 4 among the trade partners of the Russian Federation, and is now dropped to the as it ranked fifth, and the US ranked 4th now. Well, nobody would doubt about it. So basically, the US have replaced Italy in the ranking of foreign trade partners. So the promoter of the sanctions are the 4th trade partners, and the conclusions are for you to be drawn. Well, surveys prove that some 80% of the investors that were already present on the Russian market are still there, despite the political challenges, as diplomatically you said. Now, Evgeny Shestakov has the floor, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Belarus Republic. Evgeny Shestakov, what is the basis of the foreign policy of your country? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Evelina. Good afternoon to all of you. Well, first of all, let me thank the organizers of this forum for putting together such interesting agenda. I would like to thank them for providing us with the opportunity to work hard during these 2 days to exchange our ideas, and I have to say that I believe that this is the 5th time I'm involved in my capacity as ambassador earlier, and now as Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, so it is the 5th time I'm here at the forum. Now, talking about the bilateral relationships between Italy and Belarus, I have to say that these relationships are certainly peculiar in that such relationships, such connections are based on the humanitarian partnership that the Belarus Republic and the Italian Republic have established after the Chernobyl disaster, and in the early years after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Italian society reacted to our disaster, inviting Belarus children to spend their holidays in Italy, and our children would stay in Italy for a few months. And based on our calculations, ever since that time, over 600,000 Belarus children have come to Italy for a number of months. And many Belarus children have learned Italian. Italian is very much appreciated by the people in Belarus. So these people get to know Italy, had hands-on experience, got in touch with your country, get to know your country, and all these children now, they have become adults, and they are now entrepreneurs, and they still interact with this country. Now, talking about the political cooperation, well, I can't see any problem. Our President Lukashenko visited Rome, where he met the Italian President of the Republic and the Prime Minister of our Republic visited Italy September last, and in different international meetings took place between our foreign ministers. In the month of February, the first meeting was held for the Trade Committee of Italy and Belarus, that was co-chaired by myself. Which points out to the fact that the process is underway, and our cooperation is multilateral. There are different cooperations underway. Our foreign ministers have an ongoing contact, so we can boast of quite sound relations with Italy. There are no hindrances to our relationships, so economic trade can certainly draw benefit from that. As my colleague from Russia said, I'm afraid that if in our country anyway is much smaller than Russia, so if in 2014 trade turnover was $2.2 billion, and in 2016 is slightly more than 800 million US dollars. So basically another remarkable drop. And this is not due to subjective, but this is due to objective reasons. In Italy, 205 Italian companies have been set up, or in my country, 205 companies have been set up with Italian capital. We hope that the situation can improve. This year results make us anticipate that the trough has already been overcome. We believe that next year the situation is going to improve. And I believe that the potential is there to get back to the levels we scored in the previous years, the over $2 billion. Now, you said that the bottom has already been reached, but unfortunately that might not be the case. I don't know. Deputy Minister. We've just learned that there are an ongoing relationship between Russia and Italy. Well, that probably could lead to Eurasian space development, so as to develop a common future in Eurasia. What do you think are the most effective diplomatic tools available nowadays? The bilateral agreements between Italy and Belarus, or do you think that we can also rely on the contribution from the Eurasian Union? Thank you for your question. I would like to understand what is the point if a country is involved in many associations? Well, I think that the only option is that individual advantages can be drawn by all the states that are members to such associations and union, consolidating obviously the relationship amongst the states that are parties to this union, so as to increase the security. As diplomat we say, but political dialogue can be used bilaterally, and economic dialogue can be used also within the Eurasian community. I'd like to remind the audience that Eurasian community marks an economic integration that has no military side to it. Within the Eurasian Union, competition exists, of course, among the different member countries because they're all fighting to get more foreign investment, despite the effort aimed at synchronizing and harmonizing our legislation, despite the fact that the Eurasian Union had already appointed certain supranational functions. There are still differences in terms of legislation, logistics, and so on and so forth, that in a way make it possible for each of the country to benefit from certain advantages. I believe that the delocation would be very positive because that would pave the way to access 180 million citizens in the Eurasian Union for the Italian companies wishing to delocate or to locate their plants in Belarus, for example. And the Silk Road project is also key. Together with the Chinese partners, we are developing an important science park, and you're all invited to an impress in a few kilometers away from the border between Belarus and Poland, i.e. at the borders between the Eurasian Union and the European Union. 6 hectares of land have been devoted to the Italian industrial district. So all companies wishing to manufacture something in Eurasia are welcome to come to this 6 hectares. And let me ask the following: how do you value the interest of foreign investors vis-a-vis Belarus as part of the Eurasian Union? Because again, this is something that we are talking about in Russia as well, in that we want to understand whether being part to the Eurasian Union is something helping us, or should we just go on with bilateral agreements and relations. Eurasian Union is a very young union. The investments that get to us are on the increase year on year. Now, I'm not going to quote figures because I might get them wrong, but anyway, I think it's something like $17 billion, but it might be difficult to understand whether this money is invested because companies want to be active in Belarus, or because they want to be part of the future Eurasian Union. I believe that every new plant, every new company which is incorporated in Belarus, and remarkable investments are made, especially when it comes to the agro-food industry. Well, all such investments certainly involve also a development within the Eurasian Union. We're very strong in agricultural production, and I believe that all investors coming to us think they're investing also in the Eurasian Union. Now, I'd like to address also all the members to the Eurasian Union, and I believe that one important advantage that can be drawn from partaking to this is the a fair competition which derives from the customs union that is established. Having said as much, I'd like to give the floor now to the ambassador of Armenia to Italy. Chair, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I would like first of all to thank the organizers of the forum. I'm very proud to be involved for the 5th time . this initiative is greatly successful. Now, dear guests, Armenia, thanks to its geographical situation, has always been at the crossroads of trade. We have always been part of, we are always at the crossroads between East and West, and we are still at the crossroads, and new possibilities are offered by Armenia. Different agreements have been entered into with state partners, so much so that Armenia can have access to a market of over 300 million consumers with Armenian services and products are demanded. As members of the Eurasian Union, we enjoy free access to over 180 million consumers. We join common borders, so there's a custom-free area. We can also get to Iran citizens. We enjoy a friendly relationship with all the countries on the Black Sea, so much so that we can enjoy trade also with a Eurasian country, with the European Union. And I wish also to highlight that the common value we share with the European Union have paved the way to new trade options in the general framework of the preferences. So the North-South corridor would enable Armenia to become the shortest transit between the Persian Gulf and the ports of the Black Sea. This year, Armenia is celebrating its 25th anniversary of its independence. During these 25 years, thanks to the many effort that has always been carried out, Armenia has improved its parameters, and the rating of the World Bank, for example, and other such organizations are telling us that Armenia, over the past 6 months, has improved importantly. So we ranked 2043, now we rank at 25, and in terms of safe business organization, we rank 5th. Looking at the individual freedoms, we rank 54 out of 189 countries. So all these rankings, all these assessments are very reassuring. The Armenian government is still working to establish even closer ties so as to benefit the business community. Ladies and gentlemen, there are certain industries in Armenia that had been referred to as the top priorities by the government, among which IT, agriculture, tourism, and others. Well, now, let me introduce very briefly IT, an industry which is one enjoying the best prospects. Ever since the Soviet Union, Armenia had a strong potential for the development of IT. Armenia, indeed, has always been considered as one hub for the software development, for engineering, production of semiconductors and other components. The labor force is one of the strengths of Armenia when it comes to IT. Labor force is specialized, skilled, and very productive. So much so that Armenian experts are very attractive for foreign investors. Important successes have been arrived at on by this knowledge-based society. Innovation transfer made it possible for our country to be at the same level as fully industrialized countries. In our education system, there are more than 10 universities devoted to technologies. This is why Armenia can enjoy skilled staff and labor force and a very highly qualified human resources. the Turon Center is one of the examples. The students of middle school can transform their ideas and dreams into products and technology solutions. Most of the students now address the IT and communication and technology industries because these are the ones that apparently are more promising. Universities by themselves cannot provide the students with a sufficient experience to find a job in the industry. To solve this problem, many companies, including also world leaders in the IT, as the Center for Innovation of Microsoft Armenia, IBM, and the Armenian Indian Center for IT and other such institutions and local international bodies organized ad hoc training courses for students, laying emphasis on the development of innovative mindset, web programming, cybernetic security, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. At Synopsys, Cisco, and Oracle, and other companies, such courses are organized. They have merged with Armenian companies. Such centers are based in Yerevan. Important efforts have been made by Armenia and other associations, showing that Armenia has already been recognized and acknowledged when it comes to IT. There are as many as 150 companies, including over $500 million, and there are some 13 million people employed by this industry. IT grew by 21% last year, and 79 companies have been incorporated. The largest quota of IT products, 79.5%, is exported to Canada and the US. 10.8% is exported to Europe, and in Russia and CIS countries, nearly 8.5% of the products are exported. Among the other countries, there's the United Arab Emirates, that outsource their accounting and banking systems. Last year, the legislators adopted acts to support IT industry, also with reference to the tax policy for these companies and the startups, including zero rate at the beginning in terms of taxes, and a reduced tax rate when they become operational. And many Armenian startups, as a consequence, proved to be very successful. Let me refer to a number of success stories. Triada, Armenian center developing an app for the iPhone, which is called the Shadowmatic, was awarded at the Apple Design Award at the conference of app developers. There's an app for PhotoPix art that was put together by Armenian experts. And that is one of the hottest startups. There's another Armenian startup, Soroner, which is very important in the virtual community of encoding. It is one of the 10 best startups for 2015. Now, to conclude, let me thank once again the organizers of this forum. I'd like to highlight that such fora are all necessary. Thanks to our joint efforts, I am sure that words are going to be translated into facts for the good of all our peoples. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Victoria. So, I think that to conclude, you should show us that you use an Armenian iPhone. Anyway, truly enough, 6 months ago, the Armenian smartphone was presented, and that was welcomed with a lot of interest. With your colleague with Belarus, we tried to think of what products in IT that you have in Belarus, what kind of problems you have in Armenia. Well, I believe that human resources are certainly very valuable in Armenia. Everybody knows English and have a very good education, and this is a competitive advantage for Armenia, so we wish you all the success. Now I would like to give the floor to Delgermas Bandrachin, the ambassador of Mongolia to the Russian Federation. Or shall I start with a question?
Потому что я приготовила презентацию, уважаемые дамы и господа.
I have a little presentation, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank the organizers for granting me the possibility to take the floor at the forum. As you know, Mongolia boasts a rich history and a special culture. Mongolia has an age-old history. In Mongolia, market economy and democracy prevail. 20 years ago, less than 5% of our GDP was contributed to by the private sector, whereas today it is the private sector that drives the economy, contributing in as much as over 80% of the GDP. Only a few years ago, the economy of our country was doing very well. Then, because of the slowdown in mining activities, our growth has slowed down. In order to go back to the original growth rate, we have to improve our budget law. Now there's agriculture and tourism that play an important role, but we try and distribute efficiently the revenue coming from the industry. Mongolia is rich in natural resources. All the minerals of the Mendeleev Chart are to be found in Mongolia. We can boast of the largest copper deposit. There are gold mines as well as silver mines. There's also one of the largest world coal deposits. Over 1 billion tons of top quality coal. There's a lot of coal to be used as an energy resource. Mongolia encourages foreign investment in all industries. In Mongolia, there's very low tax rate. The new law on investment has certainly brought about an enhancement in the business climate in our country. And the colleague who took the floor before me referred to a survey carried out by the World Bank. It makes our country, or consider that our party ranks over 150. But now in Mongolia, diversification is given priority. So major infrastructural plans are being developed. Last year, a contract was entered into between Mongolia and Japan. And this is the first case of a free trade agreement in the history of Mongolia. In Mongolia, we enjoy the free circulation of over 9,000 commodities coming from Japan, and 6,000 Mongolian commodities are traveling freely to Japan in the next decade. Customs for import are going to be reduced down to zero. In other cases, the custom rate is going to be reduced by over 90%. joint efforts are being made to do away with barriers, the bureaucratic barriers that hinder trade. In June 2015, Mongolia and the European Union signed an agreement, a memorandum of understanding, to further develop relationships with the Eurasian Economic Union. As you know, Mongolia is to be found between the two world powers, i.e. between Russia and China. And with both these countries, we hold partnerships and strategic relationships. The development of the relationship with Russia is a priority for the foreign policy of Mongolia. Upon the initiative of our president, year on year, meetings are held involving the leaders of three countries, China, Russia, and Mongolia. During the latest meeting that was held in Tashkent in June last, a program was assigned to create a corridor between China, Mongolia, and Russia for the transit of goods. This includes 32 joint projects to create a further rail corridors to simplify the customs bureaucracy and to promote cooperation in the agricultural fields. Mongolia is promoting its connections with other international relations. In 2012-2014, Mongolia held the presidency of the Democratic Committee of State, and then in 2014 it was part of the Council of Europe for Human Rights. In July last, in the capital of our city, a summit was held of ASEAN to develop the future together. President, head of state and government took place at this part of this meeting, coming from 40 different countries. Mongolia also is leading the Institute for Democracy. Now, to conclude my presentation, let me thank once again the organizers, and I wish to congratulate you for the organization of this event, because as we say in Mongolia, the last camel should always carry the heavier bags. I had actually wanted to talk before the entrepreneurs of Russia and Italy, but unfortunately there are very few delegates still present. Thank you, Madam Bagratz. Obviously, the history of the great empire of Mongolia is something that we all know about. The relationship between Mongolia and a Eurasian Union certainly won't be limited to the memorandum of understanding that you signed. I understand that there are questions from the floor. I have to introduce myself, Ashar Gregorian. I work in Slovakia as a president of a holding. Eurasia Financial Center. I would like to make a consideration with reference to what the ambassador of the Republic of Armenia said. I share 100% of the things that she said, and I would like to confirm what I said yesterday, and that is that our holding is committed in the development of the New Silk Road project between China, Iran, and Slovakia. I believe that there are very good opportunities to develop a whole set of projects and investments in Armenia. First of all, for the development of the railroad between Armenia and Iran, I would like to invite you to follow the invitation as was launched by our ambassadors to join efforts with us and develop a Euro-Asiatic fund in Armenia. You know that Armenians are to be found all over the world. And I'm sure that the ambassador of Mongolia can tell us that Armenians are to be found also in Mongolia. I'd like to address a question to the ambassador of the Russian Federation to Italy, Mr. Razov. I followed your contribution with great interest. I believe that this forum is pretty peculiar. I can introduce myself as a co-chair of the Pan-European Center for Economic and Political Analysis that was established last year by the former Prime Minister of Slovakia in the city hosting the headquarters of our center. We invited Professor Falico, we invited a whole set of guests, and there were also delegates coming from other Western countries, but unfortunately, I have to say, unfortunately, things were said here over the past 2 days that do not have the paper or are covered by the papers. Mr. Falico said that he should establish a TV network in Italy, and I've also immediately said that Bratislava in Slovakia wanted to have a branch of this channel so as to present all the information that are shared here to the general public, what they say in Europe, and I apologize. I understand at the time, I understand your point, I take your point, you wanted to create a television. No, I have to raise a question. I travel to Moscow very often, I talk to journalists, I ask for support, but nobody wanted ever to support our center. And our center is a center for the dissemination of what is said here. So I was wondering whether you can help us in disseminating the information that are shared here. So I'd like to give the floor to Sergei Sergeyevich. Now, I think that you raise a very interesting subject. I hope I can certainly give moral and political support. Italian journalists are rather objective when they refer about the international events where Russia is involved. There are exceptions, though. At times we have to react to such exceptions. And in that case, we send letters to different papers to express our own opinion. Our opinion is very straightforward. Every journalist has a full right to enjoy freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to express one's political ideas, irrespective of the fact that we share with that or not. But the freedom of speech, the freedom of journalism also requires some sense of responsibility vis-a-vis vis-a-vis what journalists say or write. Now, when journalists speak or write and they tell lies, well, we should say so. And in that case, we have to react. Now, going back to your question, I fully support your request. All media, TV and other, obviously should disseminate information. If you have a tangible, practical proposal, I'm ready to support it. So when you express your point of view, when you send your point of view to the editor, does everything get published? Well, it depends, because publishers or the editor-in-chief knows our decision, our point of view. Now, we are touching upon a subject that could keep us here for too long, I'm afraid. So, I, as a chairperson, I would like to conclude the session, and I believe that all of us talked in Russian, and I believe this is a prerequisite to further develop our dialogue, the Russian language, the English language, are languages that are widely spoken in the Eurasian space. So the better we get to understand one another, the greater the prospects for our success in the future. Thank you very much to you all. So once again, 2 extraordinary days. The forum is an unreplaceable platform to develop friendship and cooperation and promote development of activities between a world, Eurasia, which is not that well known in Europe, not as much as you would like, and in Europe, where the business community and the companies are ever more interested in widening up their horizons and cooperate. The cooperation between Italy and Russia dates back to long years ago. There are elements of excellences that have marked the past history, and we've learned about that. And it is very much encouraging framework in a situation that sometimes is a bit of a predicament that seems that there's no will to cooperate. And sometimes the institutions that represent take up a negative attitude. An important development of the Verona Forum is the result of the cooperation with Ross Congress, which is sides with Conoscere Eurasia, to make Eurasia, to establish ties with the St. Petersburg Forum, which is probably one of the most important events, which is organized by the Russian Federation, involving the whole rest of the world. Now, I'd like to raise a question for Mr. Stuglev. How do you see the possibility for these important events to develop further, to become the platform leading to greater understanding, to stronger ties, to overcome the barriers that are at times raised, to make work and cooperation more difficult? Good afternoon. I'll try to be brief because I understand this is the end of the forum. And as you observed, and we have to establish a platform for cooperation. Well, this, I believe, is the most important task of our organization. We organize over 100 events on a yearly basis. The St. Petersburg Economic Forum certainly is the most important, and then there's the Sochi Investment meeting and many others. But the Verona Forum has been held now for 5 consecutive years at the Eurasian Forum, and we greatly support this initiative and have been for the last 3 years, thanks to the commitment and involvement of Professor Fallica, but the forum in itself is growing year on year. This is unquestionable. And as a matter of fact, the most important parties are already involved, both on the side of the European Union and on the side of the Eurasian Union. At the beginning of the forum, a very important sentence was said: we have to develop a dialogue, and we're now in a situation where many of the old problems seem to be solved, but now we have been, in a way, placed backwards because, and thanks to these initiatives, we share more. We can start on old premises, and you see that there are here that we meet delegates from the business community, from the media, and I believe that these institutions are holding a dialogue as if it was never interrupted. So considering that the political channels have been narrowed, well, we have to develop other channels so as to enlarge and widen cooperation and find other options for growth and try to prevent our relationships from becoming less important. I would like to thank again Professor Fallica, all the speakers, all the delegates for attending the meeting. Thank you. Well, as a matter of fact, companies are showing greater interest in cooperation, but I believe that also the institutions are showing some interest. Well, this forum, for example, has heard what Professor Prodi has said and what has been reiterated by Madame Volovaya, i.e., let's establish a conference, let's try and get and talk together to understand one another. So on the one hand, the European institutions have shown little understanding, but there's an opening on the other side. There's an opening to prolonged dialogue. By the way, the Italian Prime Minister, who was invited to this meeting, hasn't come, but he has stressed the uselessness of sanctions. So, in a way, he referred to the fact that sanctions basically discontinue growth without bringing about any benefit for anyone. So reference was made to the need to start a new conference, to open new tables. So this is a well-known and acknowledged forum. And an important agreement was signed here with China that extends, widens up the already existing relationships that had been started a few years ago. Well, 3 years ago, by the way, China was involved for the first time, and now that beginning basically was translated into the actual signing of an agreement. So interest was shown in to the opening up of new discussions. So to what extent do you think the forum can facilitate this dialogue so that institutions can cooperate to side the companies that are already fully cooperating? Over to you, Professor Fallica. Well, first of all, let me thank Alexander Stuglev, which is the CEO of the Ross Congress Foundation. And he's the director of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. I have to say that ever since Ross Congress co-organized our initiatives, and this in particular, well, ever since this started off, well, the forum, the Verona Forum grew importantly, and that proved to be extremely successful. This success is also due to the subject matter of this forum, to the involvement of the business community. Here tonight, after 2 days that have been very intense, the business community, the delegates are probably exhausted. And yet there are some that are still here. And this is a clear sign that there's an interest on their side. We believe that this forum contributes also to the success of the St. Petersburg International Forum, which is going to be held next year between the 1st and the 3rd of June. In 2016, Ross Congress offered us an opportunity to establish within this forum a stand 100% of Italians, something that has never happened in the history of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, when that has been a success that we reach thanks to the contribution of the St. Petersburg Forum and the Ross Congress. That also thanks to the contribution from Ross Congress, we have been given the possibility to meet Chinese partners, Indian partners, and Antonio Cianci has enabled us to enter into this agreement with the International Technology Transfer Network, ITTN. What do we think about China? What do you think about Asia? Well, we believe that the best relationship that we might establish with China in Asia is something that we have to establish through Russia. I, for myself, believe that the relationship between Europe and Asia, Europe and China, has to go through Russia. Not because of any other reasons, but because Russia plays an important geopolitical role and has this kind of role on the international exchequer. And this is what we reiterate in all the regional initiatives that we hold in Italy. And this year we're organizing similar meetings also in Switzerland. So now, to full suit to the proposal that was raised by President Prodi, as of next year, we intend to organize here a session between members of the Commission of the European Union and members of the Commission of the Eurasian Commission. This is a challenge that we should take upon it ourselves so as to promote dialogue between Europe on the one hand and Eurasia on the other side. Always on condition that between Europe and Eurasia, the main interlocutor should be Russia. Well, the fundamental interlocutor should be the Russian Federation, as I say. Very well, this was a clear message. This was a wish that was expressed. I believe there's nothing to add. But I think we should only work for the next edition of the forum to be even more successful than this year's edition. That was certainly greatly appreciated. We have to do our best so that the forum, thanks to the cooperation of Ross Congress and thanks to the cooperation of all sponsors and friends and all of those who made this possible, well, we hope that the next year forum may still contribute to progress and peace as well. Something which is greatly topical these days. Thank you very much to you all. Now, let me conclude setting the date for this forum. So the 6th edition of the Eurasian Forum, the 10th edition of the forum that we've been holding in Verona, will take place on October 19th and 20th in 2017. And between June 1st and June 3rd in 2017, the 21st edition of the St. Petersburg's International Economic Forum will take place. And we'd like to invite all SMEs also to that forum. They'll have a conference devoted to them on May 31st. May 31st is the day which is fully devoted to the SMEs at the St. Petersburg Forum. There's a program that you'll be receiving shortly. Thank you very much again. Thank you for bearing with us, and we have to make sure that the dialogue is kept open. Thank you.
Grazie.